In Acts chapter 12, we're going to see a story. We're going to probably go back there again next week, but in Acts chapter 12, there's a story of the arrest of Peter for preaching the gospel. I want to begin this morning by asking you a question. What is your greatest fear? What is it that you fear the most? Is it your own mortality, your own death? Maybe the death of a loved one, the loss of children or parents? What is your greatest fear? A lot of superhero movies, and when you watch the superhero movies, there seems to be a common trait that one of the things that sets them apart from other folks is that they're able to face that fear of death and face it head on. And we admire that quality. In Acts chapter 12, verses 1 through 5, it says, "It was about that time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword. And when he saw that this met with approval among the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the festival of the unleavened bread. After arresting him, he put him into prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him." In this passage, a man named King Herod wanted some political points. We see a lot of politicians doing that, don't we? And so since the Jews were persecuting Christians, he decided to join in with them. He had arrested some that belonged to the church, intended to torture them and persecute them. He saw that once he did this, that the polls began to rise in his favor, the political points that he so wanted. And so he decided to go after the pastor. He wanted to go after the big guy. So he went after Peter. Now, Peter had been warned before by the Jews to quit preaching. Been warned over and over again, but he kept on. The Sanhedrin at that time was the ruling party of the Jews. And the Sanhedrin were the ones that had brought Jesus and had put him on trial before them. They were judges at that time. And so the ruling Jews, the Sanhedrin in those days, they were sort of in political power, but not all the way. Because Israel had been conquered by Rome, and so therefore they could only do what Rome allowed them to do. And so the Sanhedrin was allowed to do certain things, like they were allowed to beat people, but capital punishment was under Roman authority. They could not put anyone to death, and that's why when Jesus, after being brought on trial before the Sanhedrin and found guilty, he still had to be brought before Pilate before he could be put to death, because Rome had to put the stamp on it. But King Herod was a little bit different. Although he was Jewish, and although he was called the King of the Jews, he was really a puppet of Rome. Now, as you read the New Testament, you will hear the name Herod, King Herod, over and over again. Because during the New Testament time, there were actually 4 King Herods. First of all, there was King Herod the Great. He was the one that you find in Matthew that talked to the wise men. He's the one that got the wise men to come to him and said, "Find this baby that I may worship him." And he was trying to deceive the wise men. And King Herod the Great was the one that eventually sent his soldiers into Bethlehem to kill all the children under the age of 2. So King Herod could do capital punishment because he was a puppet of Rome, and he worked well with Roman authority. He was aligned with Rome, and he held Roman authority. So he could give the death sentence. His son was Herod Antipas. You know Herod Antipas because he was the one that beheaded John the Baptist. He's the one whose stepdaughter danced in front of him and asked for John the Baptist's head. Now, the one we're talking about here is his son. His name is King Herod Agrippa the First. And King Herod Agrippa has just now basically come into power. And eventually you will see King Herod Agrippa the Second. That's the one Paul stands before and says Agrippa, and he talks to Agrippa and defends his faith and says, and Agrippa says to him, what, in this short time you're going to make me become a Christian? So there are 4 Herods. This Herod is King Agrippa the First. And so he's trying, like I said, to get political points. And so he does something. He has James arrested and killed by the sword. And he's now bringing in other Christians. But like I said, he's now going for the head of the movement, which is Peter. And so King Agrippa, Herod Agrippa, has Peter arrested and has him thrown into prison. And he really wants to make a spectacle of this. He really wants to make a show. So as he arrests him, he makes it a big, wants to get on CNN, I guess. And so he has him guarded by 16 guards. So he has 16 people arresting this one guy. Now, Peter is brought in shackles. He's in chains. He's actually chained to 2 soldiers. One soldier on his right and one soldier on his left. He's taken into a dark dungeon. And then there's layers of guards out to the city gate. So there was no way that Peter was going to be able to escape. Now, what happens in this story are 5 miracles that I want to point out to you. 5 miracles. Now, what is a miracle, first of all? How do we determine what a miracle? We often say this is a miracle. Like some of y'all said last night, it's a miracle that Wade won that miniature golf world championship of the universe. But it wasn't. It was skill. But we like to attribute miracles where miracles don't belong. Let me tell you what a miracle is. This is the best definition of a miracle I can find. A miracle is an extraordinary, periodic, and temporary interference with the laws of nature so that God's presence, purpose, or power might be displayed or understood. I want to say that again. A miracle is an extraordinary, periodic, or temporary interference with the laws of nature so that God's presence, purpose, or power might be displayed or understood. So I want to point out real quickly 5 miracles that occurs that night as Peter is shackled between 2 guards in a dark prison. First thing that happens is, we'll find in Acts chapter 12, 6 through 7, the night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him. "Quick, get up," he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. The very first miracle that the Bible says, that's recorded here, is that an angel appeared. And when this angel appeared in this dark dungeon, it appeared as a light. There was a light. Now you can imagine in this middle of this darkness, suddenly it's bright. And there's an angel. There's a being there. And he begins to speak to Peter. Peter, the Bible says, thinks it's a vision at first. He's not even sure it's an angel. But the first miracle is an angel has visited Peter in the prison. The second miracle is this, that the angel told Peter to stand up. So when Peter stands up, the chains just unlock and fall off. Now he's between 2 guards. Imagine that. Chain, one hand to the hand of the other guard, one hand to the hand of another guard. The angel says, stand up. Peter stands up, and when he does, the chain just comes loose, falls off. That's a miracle. Undeniably a miracle. Shackled between 2 soldiers, and when he stands up, the chains fall off. Now let's go to miracle number 3. It's found in Acts chapter 12, verse 8 through 10. Then the angel said to him, put on your clothes and sandals. And Peter did so. Wrap your cloak around you and follow me. The angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea what the angel was doing and what was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed through the first and the second guards. Then they came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. And when they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Miracle number 3. Somehow they were able to slip past 4 centuries of guards unnoticed. It doesn't say the guards were asleep. It just says they walked past them as though somehow they were a ghost. They just walked past all these centuries of guards, 16 guards. They walked past and no guard even noticed them gone. Now, they were to guard. These guards were told and commanded and knew that they were to guard Peter with their lives. You do not let him escape, no matter what. How do we know that? Well, Acts chapter 12, verse 18 and 19 tells us when they found Peter missing. Look what happens in Acts chapter 12, 18 and 19. In the morning, there was no small commotion among the soldiers as what had happened or what had become of Peter. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed. All 16 guards were killed because they let Peter escape. So it was a miracle that somehow Peter, who had been shackled to 2 guards, one of the greatest magic shows that's ever been done, was able to come unchained from 2 guards and slip past 16 guards that were told to guard Peter with their lives. Undeniably a miracle. The 4th miracle was this. Peter walks up to the gate, and all of a sudden the gate just unlocks and opens. Nobody pushed it. He just walks up to a locked gate, and the gate just opens, and he walks on out. These are undeniably miracles. Miracles. Now, as I began to look at this passage, one of the thoughts that came to my mind was, why? I mean, what caused this miracle? And I believe that the New Testament points out to us, in this case, specifically, why this miracle occurred. Look what it says in Acts chapter 12, verse 5. It says, so Peter was kept in prison, and it makes note of this, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. You see, the Greek word earnestly, it means to fervently, to intensely, to pray without ceasing. The church was on their knees for Peter. You know, when Jesus physically walked the face of planet Earth, there were 3 people that he held close to him that were closer than any of the other disciples. That were closer than any of the thousands that followed. That were closer than the 12. And those 3 were Peter, James, and John. These were the 3. These were the core, right, Ronnie? James had already been killed. This was early in the ministry of the church. Now here was Peter on trial for his life. And so the church is on their knees. They're begging God. And that's what the word actually means. It means to beg God. They were pleading on behalf of Peter. This wasn't just a now I lay me down to sleep prayer. This was not just a Lord forgive us prayer. There were people in that church that were fervently, and it points that out in the Greek, fervently, earnestly, unceasingly begging God that Peter somehow be freed. You know, I recently discovered the power of prayer, or rediscovered the power of prayer. Last week, I had been having some issues with thought it was my stomach or whatever, having this digestion or whatever, heartburn. And I just kind of felt like that, I couldn't figure it out because it went on for a couple of days. And I was like, it's kind of crazy. I haven't even really eaten anything. I haven't eaten anything all day, and yet my having this indigestion's kind of going on. In the back of my mind, I was wondering if it was my heart. My wife was about to go to Canada she was supposed to fly out that Saturday morning, and so I didn't really want to say much about it. I wanted to get her where she needed to be to see her grandkids, because she only gets to go once a year, and she was all excited about it, and so I couldn't wait to get her just because she was excited in the air and on the way to see her grandchildren. And so even though I kind of thought about it in the back of my mind, well, maybe this is something I ought to go get checked out, I was kind of thinking maybe I'll do this after she gets to Canada, and I'll go to the doctor and see if I got an ulcer or something, Well, July the 4th, we went out to eat, and we did go to an all-you-can-eat buffet. And so when we got home kind of early that day, and so my wife got into our swimming pool, and when she got into the swimming pool, I went out and got those sprayer because I hate to weed eat, and I'm not going to weed eat. I repented of weed eating a long time ago. I remember the last weed eater I touched, I threw it somewhere, and I never looked for it. And because I never could get it started, and when I did get it started, those little string things would always come out, and I could never get them out. So I'd given up weed eating, and so I just round up as my edger, I just little round up strips through my driveway, around my driveway and stuff. So got my round up out, and I would kind of begin to round up the driveway, and I felt this heart. I felt my chest, man. It's like tight. And it's that indigestion again, man. All you could eat crab legs, I guess, If it hadn't been for just happening day after day, maybe I'd have just kind of let it go. So I went inside and got some Tums, and I took some antacid and kind of hung out there for a minute, and it just got worse, man. It just couldn't seem to get any relief from it, It got worse. And then so I thought, man, I really probably need to go to the hospital, but I'm going to wait and see if I can't get past this thing, because she's all excited about going to Canada, and she's in the pool, and so I went and took a couple of baby aspirin just in case, and it just got worse. And I walked outside, and I said, baby, I hate to tell you this, but I think you're going to have to carry me to the hospital. So she said, where do you want to go? I said, well, the way I feel right now, you probably need to carry me to Covington, And so we got in the car, and we started going to the hospital, and as we got closer, I began to feel a little bit more relief, and I started thinking, well, even if I'm having some kind of heart condition, or if something's going on, then all Covington's going to do is stabilize me, and they're going to send me somewhere else anyway, and it probably cost me an ambulance trip or whatever. So why don't you just carry me to Methodist North? Now, there's always been a fear in me that one day this would happen, and I'll tell you why. Because my biological father died of a heart attack at 42. My biological grandfather, died of a heart attack at 38. So this has been something that's always been on my mind. So when I'm feeling these chest pains, I'm going to the hospital, taking us to Methodist North, and on the way down there, I got into the hospital room and in the emergency room, and I said, I'm having little chest pains, and my wife's yelling, no, he's having a heart attack. I said, I'm having chest pains. It may be indigestion. He's having a heart attack. You need to get him back there. Because, she wanted to get me back there. So anyway, they did get me back there, and they did an EKG, and they did blood work, and they came back to me, and they said, well, we don't see any signs of a heart attack. It looks, you're okay, and we're going to keep you around for a few hours, because sometimes the enzymes don't show up at first, and you need to stick around for about 3 hours. It's about 9 o'clock at this time, and I'm looking at her going, baby, I'm so sorry, but you can sleep on the plane tomorrow. It'll be okay. I know we're going to get home late, but you can sleep on the plane tomorrow. Anyway, they did some CAT scans and making sure my stomach wasn't messed up, or they give me some shots for all that stuff, for my indigestion or whatever, and did some chest x-rays and all this stuff. You know how they do at the hospital. And so anyway, about 12 o'clock, I figured they was going to come in there and say, well, you can go on home. It looks like that you have a hernia, or you have a bad indigestion or whatever. She came in there, she said, you got to stay. And the doctor said, you're having something going on with your heart. And so what happened is that my heart really broke, and I don't mean this to be heroic. I'm actually saying this honestly. My heart broke because of her. because I knew that she so wanted to go to Canada. And so I told her, I said, I'm so sorry that that I'm having to stay, but we'll get you there as soon as we can. And anyway, that was about 12 o'clock at night. And so what happened is that they put me on blood thinner in case something did happen. And I was still having chest pains, but, nothing too severe until about 3 o'clock in the morning. And if you can imagine my wife and I laying in one of those little hospital beds, because that's what we do. When one of us is in that emergency room, little old single bed, both of us are in that single bed. And so we're both laying in that little bed and watching TV and just waiting on a room in the hospital. And the monitors are beeping, and all of a sudden my chest started hurting. And I looked up, and my blood pressure had went from like 130 over 85, 90 to like 150 over 100. And my heart rate had went from 70s up into like 90s, and then it just kept climbing. All of a sudden, my heart rate hit 155, 175. My blood pressure hit 195 over 130. And at that point, I knew what was happening. And I thought, this is it. I called for a nurse, but it being a holiday, there weren't many nurses around, and there's only one doctor in the whole place, and they were treating quite a few patients. And so I saw my nurse that had been working with me walk down the hall, and I yelled at her. I said, Ashley, I'm having a heart attack. I really believe I'm having a heart attack. So she came in the room, and they began to shoot me up with morphine, and they began to give me do EKGs, and they began to give me the nitroglycerin tablet. And at that point, I thought, I'm about to go see Jesus. And so, this is probably going to sound crazy. So I told my wife, I said, hand me your phone, because my phone, as usual, was dead. I said, hand me your phone and call Aubrey, my daughter. So she handed me her phone. I called Aubrey, and I just said, I love you. I'm in a hospital, and I just want you to know how proud I am of you. Called my son in Japan, and it was at least it was 5 p.m. there. It wasn't like Aubrey getting woke up at 3 o'clock. It was 5 p.m. there, and so called him, and I told him basically the same thing. I'm so proud of you. I love you. Basically, I wanted to say goodbye. Maybe that sounds crazy, but I want to say goodbye to my kids in case it didn't work out, and let them pray for me, because that was who was on my mind. And I did realize at that point that if you think you're dying, or if you're dying, that the people you love are the ones that's on your mind. And so I wanted to say goodbye. They got my heart rate down, and they got the blood pressure down. And because there was no, like I said, it was 4th of July weekend, there was not going to be the stuff open the next day or the next day, so I had to wait in the hospital till Monday. But I got a catheterization, and what they did was they told me that one of 3 things would happen, is that either I would get on medication, or if the blockage was bad enough, they would put stents in, and if it was completely blocked off, they would send me down to another hospital downtown, and I'd have open heart surgery. God blessed me that I was 99% blocked in one artery. Actually, I think it was the Widowmaker artery. And I was 88% blocked in another one. But they were able to treat it with stents. And I did have multiple heart attacks in those couple of days. It wasn't as intense as that one that night, but I did have several more as I was waiting. But I think the blood thinner and the things helped me to get past that. So what does that got to do with prayer? Well, it has this to do with prayer. When I first went in the hospital, I didn't want anybody to know it. I didn't. I didn't advertise it. I didn't put it on Facebook. None of that. I didn't call anybody. I didn't want nobody to know because I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't want people to worry about it, and it is what it is, you know. And for some reason, I'm so arrogant. I don't want to need people. Have you ever met anybody that arrogant who just don't want to need people? So I didn't really want people to know, and but my wife, of course, told a few people, Kitty. So William and Brother Gene found out, but I made them swear to secrecy. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody I'm here. But when I found out for sure that it was a heart attack, then I knew that, you know, maybe it was okay for me to tell some folks because now I need prayer. So I posted it on Facebook that I was going through some of this and just maybe keep me in your prayers. I was astounded. Astounded. Hundreds of people called me, wrote messages to me, wrote on my page. Hundreds. I didn't even think that many people liked me. I discovered at that moment how much I needed people. Listen, I looked at every heart, every thumbs up, every little hug emoji. I read every comment. I answered every phone call. I texted back every person that texted me. And I realized just how much I needed people, just how much I needed prayer. And I heard from people that literally, and I mean this, I have not seen since college, and that was like 2 or 3 years ago. I was like 30-something, 40-something years ago. I haven't seen these guys in 40 years. I was hearing from people that I hadn't seen in 40 years, giving me phone calls and checking on me. Do you know how much encouragement and hope that gave me? Man, I don't know how you make it if you don't have a church. I don't know how you make it. How do you face fear? I don't know how you make it without God. How do you make it? I have to have Him. I have to have Him. The last thoughts on my mind as I'm laying in there having these heart attacks is, God, I'm about to see you. I got to have that. That hope. That hope. Now, I'm not sure that everybody prayed for me who said they would pray for me. I'm not sure of that. I'm sure some of them are like me. They're idiots. They'll say things like that, and then they'll forget, or they're too busy to pray, or they're too selfish to pray about anybody but themselves. But I know some of you did. I know you did. And it only takes 2 or 3 out of the hundreds who fervently and intensely and pray without ceasing. You see, because when you're powerless and no longer in control, when you're forced to rely only on God or people who are praying for you, then they are precious and vital to you. Now, there's going to come a day when I don't care how fervently you pray for me, it's not going to matter. Because Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27 says this, and as is appointed unto men once to die, but after that, the judgment. There's going to come a day when it's time for me to go home. And no matter how much you pray, how fervently you pray, I'm going home. You see, even Peter, even though he just had a miracle here and escaped this prison, he was eventually crucified upside down according to church tradition. And I'm sure there was people praying for him then too. You see, all of us is going to leave this life one day, and nobody's exempt. And history has proven that the best of us are not immortal. We're all going to die. But I do believe, and I believe this, that I was spared because of your fervent prayers. Not just prayers of when I was in the hospital, but people who pray for the pastor every single day. Because it was a miracle for me that I even went to the hospital, because I wasn't going to go. But some of you prayed for me every day. And praying after, praying for me while I was in the hospital. But I know that there's going to come a day when it's not going to matter, because it's time for me to go. Now, too many of us, we like to pray to God like he's a genie in a lamp. We only rub the lamp when we want something, don't we? We want the genie to appear when we need something, but the rest of the time, God, just stay in your lamp. Stay in a bottle. When we need him, we rub the lamp, we make our demand. If we don't get our way, we get angry. We got a bad genie. But God's not a genie in the lamp. He's the God of the universe. He's the God of history, and he's the God eternal. And he knows what he's doing, and our lives are nothing but a blink of an eye in the terms of all eternity. It's just a blink of an eye. Our lives are just such a blink, just in the midst of a vast eternity. Our lives are nothing but a blink. It's just over so quickly. You know, I never understand why out of the three closest men to Jesus, I mean, Jesus invested more in Peter, James, and John than any other men while he was physically walking the face of the earth. You cannot read the New Testament without hearing Peter, James, and John, and yet James died early in the ministry of the first church. He was gone. I don't know why God did that. I don't know why three people were chosen, yet James had to leave this life so early. I never understood why Corey Walker had to leave this life so early, but he did. I don't understand why God does what he does, but I know that God is the writer of history. I said a while ago, and I'm about to close, I said a while ago that there were 5 miracles. So far, I've only talked about 4, but I do want to talk lastly about one more miracle that may go unnoticed. You see, the greatest miracle in this story is not an angel appears and lights up a dark cell. The greatest miracle in this story is not the chains that bound Peter fell off his wrist when he stood up. The greatest miracle in this story is not that he slipped past 4 lines of guards. The greatest miracle in this story is not that a locked city gate opened up by himself. The greatest miracle of this story is, maybe it can go unnoticed unless you know the background and unless you read closely. The greatest miracle of the story is found in Acts chapter 12, verse 6. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers. How's that a miracle? The miracle was the change that had occurred in the life of Peter. This was a man that when Jesus was arrested, fled the scene in fear for his life. In Mark chapter 14, verse 50, then everyone deserted him and fled. This was a man who denied he even knew Jesus when Jesus was on trial because he was afraid for his life. Matthew 26, 74 and 75. Then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, I don't know the man. Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken. Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and he wept bitterly. This was a man who hid behind a locked door out of fear. In John chapter 20, verse 19, on the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders. But now let's look at Peter. He's in prison, facing certain death. The greatest fear of his life was now happening, and what is he doing? Sleeping at peace. Sleeping between 2 armed guards, knowing that tomorrow is certain death or certain torture. Did he think he would escape? I don't think so. His friend James had already been put to death. But you see, Peter had the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who when facing the fiery furnace, unless they bowed a knee to a false god, they said, if we are thrown into a blazing fire, the God we are able to deliver, the God we serve is able to deliver us from the fire. But even if he does not, we will not bow. He had the same faith as the story of the martyrs in Revelation chapter 12. Verse 11, they triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their own lives so much as to shrink from death. He lived off the creed of Paul in Philippians 1, verse 21. For me to live is Christ, and to die is better, is gain. In 2 Corinthians 5, verse 6 through 8, therefore we are always confident and know that as long as we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. For we live by faith, not by sight. We are confident, I say, and would prefer to be away from the body and to be home with the Lord. They anticipated death because either way they had died to themselves years ago. Where's that kind of faith today? The kind of faith where we can face death like real Christians. I think there are two imperatives to face death like that and crisis like that. There are two imperatives to face life-threatening issues like that and maintain what it means to be a real Christian, a real child of God. First of all, you have to know who you put your faith in and trust in. We don't trust in ourselves. As I lay on that bed thinking this was my last moments, all I could think about was, God, I've never done anything good, but you're good. Saved by the blood of Jesus, saved by the grace of God, not in myself, in him and what he did for me, trusting that he loves me and that he's in control. And the last thing I believe and want to say is, to die like a Christian, you better live like one. You're not going to face your death bed. You're not going to face a life-threatening crisis and you've never prayed before. It's not going to happen. You're not going to suddenly learn how to pray. You can't face those moments like that until you've been prepared through life to face moments like that. I remember there was a man I met with one time when I was a youth pastor. And he said, I played the scenario out in my mind, Brother Wade. If a person asked me to deny Christ, he said, I would never do it. He sounded like Peter to me. I will not deny Christ. He said, I played it out in my mind. If they said either you deny Christ or we're going to kill you right now, then I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, he said, I will die for Jesus. And I said, but is that the question? The real question is not whether you will die for him once, but whether you will live for him daily. Because that's what takes effort. That's what a real Christian is. Not one that'll sacrifice one time, but that'll live for him daily and give him his life. And I cannot end this by not talking about Aaron Stubblefield once again. A man who was in the hospital. I was in the room the day before he died, and I remember walking into that intensive care room, and he was behind that curtain, and he didn't know I was there. And I could remember hearing him in that room. He was moaning and groaning, and I knew he was in intense pain. But between every groan and every sigh and every bit of pain that he was experiencing, I would hear him say, but praise you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. And when I walked into that room and he recognized I was there, he tried to straighten himself up the best he could. He tried to gather his pain inside him that was racking his body. And he said, Brother Wade, how are you doing? Whoa. How am I doing? I said, Brother Aaron, I'm good. I said, how are you? And one thing he said to me, he said, Brother Wade, I don't know whether God's going to let me get up out of this bed. If God doesn't let me get up out of this bed, then I'll be able to see him. But if God gets me out of this bed, I'm going to serve him every day of my life. Brother Aaron went home to be with Jesus that night. All the fervent prayers of the saints wasn't going to save him this time. It was his time to go. It was appointed unto man to die. Destiny. And I remember preaching Brother Aaron's funeral. And as I was writing that funeral, it came to me. Why was Brother Aaron able to die like a Christian? Because he lived like one. Every day, faithful. Faithful. And death was just one more step in his walk of faith. Trusting Jesus. I'm asking if you would to stand with me. This morning we're going to have our invitation time. If today you're without God, you're without Jesus, man, I don't know how you're doing it. I don't know how you're facing this life. We're not even talking about facing death. You got fear of everything, man. You got fear of your husband leaving you, boyfriend breaking up with you. What college you going to go to? I mean, so many fears that's so insignificant when it comes to life or death situation. We can't even get through that. Let me tell you what to do. Why don't you just trust God with it? Why don't you just give it to God? Why don't you just turn it over to Him, because He's the author and finisher of our faith. He's the one that is in control. We're not. Control is an illusion that you will never really have control of anything. If you don't believe that, just look at me as an example of trying to get my wife to Canada and wind up in a hospital bed the next day. You have no control of anything. All of our plans, as James says, we better say if the Lord wills, because we can't say what we're going to do tomorrow. Because God has the final say about tomorrow, doesn't He? So why don't whatever it is that you're fearing right now, whatever it is that you're worried about, whatever it is that's going on in your life that keeps you up at night, why don't you give it to God right now and say, God, whatever, life or death, it don't matter. Whatever, it's yours. I'm giving it to you. I'm laying it right here at your feet today. God, you just take care of it, and I'm just going to relax and enjoy the ride. Because I can't do anything about it anyway. So during this invitation time, this altar is open for you. I'll be glad to pray with you. If you'd like to pray by yourself, we'll pray alongside you. But the fervent prayers of people praying with you are so very vital and so important. Don't let your pride keep you from asking people, like I did, for praying for you and with you. Don't let that pride stop you from doing that. So this invitation will be open to you. Father, we just thank you today, God, right now for all the people that are here, God. And we just pray that, Lord Jesus, today we could trust you the way you want us to trust you. And that, Father, you today would have your way and your will in our lives, God, as we surrender ourselves over to you. We're so tired, God, and so burdened. But your word says, and you say, come unto me, all you who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. God, may we come to you today. In Jesus' name.